Hello and welcome to Linear Talk, and my guest today is Andy Woolmer, the CEO and founder of NCFX, which was established in 2012. NewChange is a specialist transaction cost analysis consultant, specifically focusing on the rather opaque foreign exchange market. Andy has been involved in the foreign exchange business since the 1990s, having spent time at Kleinwort Benson, then Citibank, Prudential, and most recently with SE Banken. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks, Colin.
So first off, tell me, what exactly is it that NewChange offers?
Well, we began in 2012, as you said. Thanks for reminding everybody of how old I am. The business initially was set up as a transaction cost analysis business, but we realized very early into that process that it was very important to have very high quality data. The data that was available to us, particularly as a startup, was incredibly expensive and very, very hard to get hold of. So we decided to start building our own database. And since then, the data side of the business has really become the most significant component of NewChange. So we supply data to a lot of other transaction cost analysis providers, and we supply to banks, we supply to brokers, we supply to anybody who might have a need to understand from an objective perspective what the foreign exchange mid-rate, and I stress we only supply mid-rates, was at any given time. So the genesis was initially transaction cost analysis. We still do that. We still have software that's available for people, to do that kind of analysis. But really, we're very, very focused on the data business in particular.
Okay, I mean, with transaction cost analysis, this is something that's been around for a while, but is there a reason why it's sort of suddenly become more important?
Well, I think the answer most people would give is probably regulatory pressure, and I think that that's very obviously an issue. But I like to think that there's, the good asset managers want to be choosing the best services for their clients. They want to be using the best services. And of course, in order to assess which service is best, you need to be able to measure on a common basis across all of your providers. And that's what we're seeing people doing. So I think that competition in asset management is incredibly fierce. Of course it is. It's unbelievably competitive marketplace. And, 50 basis points really matters. And if you can achieve 50 basis points simply by lowering costs, and believe me, we've seen much worse than that, then, that's a great route to go. That's a great way of doing it.
And I guess for many years, except for specialists in the foreign exchange market, foreign exchange transactions were just a cost of doing business. And things are really changing now with the regulators pushing it also, I guess.
Yes. I think, the flip side of my competition argument is, of course, when nobody's competing, then don't go out and compete because you'll incur costs, and why would you want to do that after all? But yes, you're quite right. I mean, it's not acceptable anymore to leave these things alone from a regulatory standpoint. And that's really the significant change, driver of change.
And thinking about the foreign exchange market, I mean, in exchange traded markets, you can get the price, the volume, the depth of book, and all of that. What are the real challenges? I know, one thing is with data, clean data versus data with glitches in it and all of that. But what would you say are the chief challenges when you start looking at a market that's over the counter?
Well, that's right. As Bill McLaren would say, you're in the Gobi Desert with foreign exchange. You're just on your own. There's nothing else to compare to. So our opinion is that, of course, the data has to be of the highest quality. The regulator has been very clear about the requirement for independence of data. So you can't use the data out of the same system that you traded in. I think actually the bigger point is that they want to separate measurement from trading. I think that's the impression I certainly have.
Lest it becomes conflicted.
Well, I think that there's a lot of very low quality transaction cost analysis where people are simply taking their transaction and measuring their transaction against themselves. I think the key thing with foreign exchange is to understand how illiquid it is. And of course, to your point about what information you have as a person trading in the foreign exchange markets, you know what you did, you know what you paid, that's all you know. So to contextualize that, you need to find an independent rate to say, okay, well, was that any good? And from there, make you extrapolate with all of your other transactions where you stand.
So if someone is looking for a transaction cost analysis provider, what are the things that you should be looking for in terms of their core competences, and what are the things that you should be trying to avoid? I mean, clearly, people who just manufacture the analysis from your own data are probably
High on the list, yes.
Yeah, high on the list
yes.
to begin with.
Avoid all you can. I think the central point is to recognise the requirements in terms of regulatory compliance and start from there. So the first thing you need to be measuring is ex ante, not ex post. I mean, a lot of transaction cost analysis we have seen is done on the drop copy confirmations of fixed messages and things like that, where the trade has already taken place, and then the measurement is done. Of course, that misses what the regulator would like everybody to do, which is to understand what the rate was immediately prior to them acting in the market to compare against the fill that they get at the end. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to ensure that there is a very common basis for everything you're comparing, and that includes the platform. Of course, the latency of any dealing platform is obviously instrumental in the cost that you end up paying. So you need a common way of comparing platform A and platform B. If you use TCA from platform A, you hide that cost that's inherent in doing that. And then finally, and of course that requires a rate that is common to all of that you can use to compare all of the transactions that you've done. And in our opinion, you should always use a mid-rate, because of course then you can compare transactions of different size. So you're really trying to capture what the pieces of the trading decision that have an impact on the cost. So passive algo, executing in ones versus risk transferring in 200 at one go. How do you compare those trades? So it's all about commonality, I think.
So a lot of things to think about, and of course in the most liquid of all markets.
Three things. Yes, I mean supposedly liquid. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's astonishing. Just as we have a few moments left, switching to the kind of market event that we saw hitting the news last week as a result of cable's precipitous decline. How does an understanding of the sort of the structure of a currency pair help an asset manager avoid those sort of pitfalls, or better still, capitalize on that kind of an event?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing to say, there was a lot of it was quite a serious diatribe from Simon Heffer in the Daily Telegraph immediately afterwards. And I think the one thing that we can say is what happened on Friday morning happened at 7 minutes past 12. Mm-hmm. I think any self-respecting foreign exchange speculator was either, certainly wasn't in the office. Yep. So I don't think that this was an action that was taken in malice, as Simon Heffer suggested, with regard to Brexit or anything of the sort. It's very clear that liquidity is not commonly available. Liquidity has extremely high value in the foreign exchange market. I think there's a lot of asset managers now understanding that when they're executing passively, they're supplying liquidity to the market, and there's a value to that. And I think what we saw in the early hours of Friday morning was that whether it was done maliciously or not, and there is an argument that it would be an algo trying to simply break the market, there are systematic forms of trading that need to be recognised, and the way that the banks have been removed from this central risk position in the market and sort of pushed to the sidelines. There isn't somebody standing there with a safety net anymore. I mean, the stakes are much, much higher. So I'm sure that what happened on Friday morning was a result of low liquidity and an algo doing something that may have worked in more liquid conditions. But one shouldn't be expecting that to be a regular occurrence, but one should recognise that these things can happen. And you have to be conscious of it with regard to orders.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Andrew.
My pleasure.
That's been a very fascinating insight into the opaque world of foreign exchange.
Indeed, I hope so.
Thanks again.